Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hemp Your Health. I'm Christy Thiel, Director of Education at CBD System and your host. And I am so sorry about last week and having to reschedule. I had a last minute travel plan literally an hour before the show. So thank you for your patience. We will bring Dr. Blair back soon. And again, thank you. And here we go. Today is an amazing show. And I have been wanting to bring this guest on since the conception of Hemp Your Health. So to kick off December and to bring a close to 2020, we have an original thought leader and cannabis educator that has contributed to the education and career of countless practitioners and a big influencer in the integrated and functional medicine community. Laura Lagano is a registered dietitian nutritionist. She is the author of this very amazing book, The CBD Miracle, and she is the co-founder and education director of the Holistic Cannabis Academy. We will remind you of this so you can check them out. Laura's journey to cannabis was led by her dissatisfaction with conventional healthcare when her daughter needed additional support and nutrition. She is also one of the handful of nutritionists that has had and completed the prestigious program of the Institute of Functional Medicine. Laura integrates nutrition, functional medicine, and the endocannabinoid system in her private practice, Laura Lagano Wellness. She's a frequent speaker at high-level conferences and consults with cannabis-related companies. She also serves on the advisory boards of medical marijuana dispensaries and is a consultant for cannabis-related companies. Laura's work has been published in the Fresh Toast, the Kid Toke, and the Holistic Primary Care magazines. She has been quoted and has written for the New York Times, Huffington Post, Forbes, and many other media outlets. Laura has been awarded an esteemed and acclaimed recognition for pioneering work on the endocannabinoid system, the healing benefits of the cannabis plant. Laura's core values are about bringing and nurturing relationships through collaboration to eliminate cannaphobia globally. Laura, you have been we met many years ago, and when you were doing the Holistic Cannabis Academy at a conference, and I have been a huge fan of yours ever since. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
You are welcome. You are a wealth of information, so I thought maybe for our listeners, we just kick it off with some fundamentals about what is the endocannabinoid system.
Sure. Well, I think the first thing to talk about is that once you really understand the endocannabinoid system, and not all the technicalities, just overall what it is and what it can do, it makes your understanding of the plant, of the cannabis plant, a lot easier. And let's just get some terminology out of the way. So we know that cannabis is sort of like the mother name, if we look at it up here, and then under cannabis, and this is all recent, this nomenclature. We have marijuana, which at one time was considered, sort of a negative term, but now if you look at most of the state programs, almost all of them are called medical marijuana program. Very few of them call it their a cannabis program. So marijuana is cannabis with more than 0.3% THC, and quite frankly, it's typically a lot more than 0.3% THC. And then hemp, and this was a definition from the Farm Bill, is lower than 0.3% THC. So that hemp that you're going to find in CBD oil products are depending if it's full spectrum, whole spectrum, we don't have to go into that right now, but it's below 0.3% THC. Some even have 0 THC. So let's talk a little bit about the endocannabinoid system. So first of all, with my training in nutrition and in functional medicine, never one time, not once, not even a little whisper, did the term endocannabinoid system ever come up. And you could be pretty assured that for most healthcare professionals, whether they're dietitians, whether they're doctors, naturopaths, massage therapists, nobody had ever learned about the endocannabinoid system. Even though it had been discovered, nobody really talked about it. And I think they just didn't really understand how it worked. But here's the thing about the endocannabinoid system. It modulates every other system in your body. So now think about that for a minute. Think about that. So we have all these other systems that we know about, right? And you didn't have to go to train to be a healthcare professional. You already know about the respiratory system, right? That is being talked about a lot during COVID. We already know about the neurological system. We know about the skeletal system. We know about the digestive system. We know it's there. But what we don't know, what we didn't know, and people are learning about now, is that these systems are modulated by the endocannabinoid system. So my favorite example of this is, for those of you who may know about the connection between the brain and the gut, we refer in functional medicine to the gut as the second brain. Why? Because about 85% of our neurotransmitters are produced in the gut. So you almost feel like gut feeling. Where does that come from? So we have this bidirectional communication between the gut and the brain. And guess who's driving the bus? The endocannabinoid system. So it's a system that's regulating all the other systems, and it's really there for balance and homeostasis. So if you were to look at chronic disease, I can go out on a limb and say that the vast majority of chronic disease is a dysfunction in the endocannabinoid system. So like all other systems in our body, it's a receptor system. Okay, so we have receptors in our bodies called endocannabinoid receptors, and endo means inside. We make our own endocannabinoids called anandamide, which actually means it's a word that means bliss in Sanskrit, and 2AG. Now, so things can go wrong. So perhaps your receptors are closed down, or you can actually produce too much anandamide. There is such a thing as too much. And what we know, and I'll give you an example, for women who have some gynecological issues. So let's use recurrent miscarriage for an example. They have too much anandamide circulating in their uteri, and the receptors probably because their receptors aren't working. And in those families, we can see a number of different gynecological issues in families that probably have an endocannabinoid system that isn't working properly. So that's when you'll see things like PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, PMDD, PMS. So many of the endometriosis. So this all has to do with the endocannabinoid system. So if you could even think about your family and maybe the health challenges that you have in your family, you can start seeing how these may be related to the endocannabinoid system. And that was the idea of a clinical endocannabinoid deficiency that was put forward by the very talented neurologist and cannabis researcher Ethan Russo. And what he did when he started talking about this, he started looking at the three comorbidities. It was fibromyalgia, migraine, and IBS, or was it IBD? In any event, these three things occur typically together. And this is where you'll see I have many patients who have migraines, who have gastrointestinal issues like Crohn's is under IBD, and cannabis is a lifesaver, for these people. So I mean, there's a lot to know about the endocannabinoid system. All living things with a spine have an endocannabinoid system. So your dog has an endocannabinoid system, and it's vital. It's vital to our health and wellness. And I think what's going to happen is eventually that is what healthcare professionals are going to learn. And then they'll learn about the other systems.
I would be so grateful because as a nutritionist myself, always looking to go as far upstream to root causes as possible, and not knowing and finding out about the endocannabinoid system, I was blown away. Like, it's like finding out that you have a microbiome. It's so huge, and it makes sense to look at root causes. And a dysfunctional or clinically deficient endocannabinoid system is, in my opinion, where most practitioners and people need to look at, because it's vast signaling. And fibromyalgia, migraines, and IBS, I mean, those are big deals, and they're not something that people should be taking lightly, especially with natural solutions like cannabis. So this is,
Exactly.
thank God you are doing your work. You have something really interesting you want to share with us, about how hemp works throughout central nervous system. So a lot of people are really, and this has to do with, cleaning the air, cleaning the slate of canophobia. So many people have learned that CBD is non-psychoactive. In fact, you hear that over and over and over again. CBD, it's the non-psychoactive part of cannabis. However, that's not truly accurate, is it?
Not at all. No. Yeah, I don't, somewhere along the line, psychoactivity became a bad thing. Yet, I would venture to say, I don't know what the statistic is. It's probably something like 85% of adults choose psychoactivity every morning, right? I think you know what I'm talking about. They
Yes.
choose to have a coffee, a caffeinated coffee. And we all know, right? I don't think anybody would argue that caffeine is not psychoactive. In fact, most people choose to drink coffee because it in fact is psychoactive, and nobody thinks that is a bad thing, right? So we have this, we choose psychoactivity. So here's something that I don't think very many people really think about. Children also choose psychoactivity, not because they're drinking coffee. I want you to think about, do you ever watch kids? My sister says when you watch kids and all the activity they do, they're like draining our batteries because we're watching them. Well, what about when kids spinning? They spin like crazy, right? When they do that we all did it as kids, right? Spinning around and around until you fall on the ground. That is psychoactivity. Or
Wow.
a friend of mine has a new grandchild, and she sends me videos regularly, which I really enjoy. And the baby was like doing this thing with his head. It wasn't at the point where he could stand. He was spinning his head like crazy. And I said, "Oh, wow, what is he doing?" She said, "Oh yeah, I think he gets a rush from that." Yeah, that's psychoactivity. This is seeking this out. This is not something that is bad. And if we know, for instance, what are the top 3 reasons why people use CBD? Anxiety, right? And right now,
Yep.
there's a lot of anxiety, right? First we had social anxiety. Well, there's not a lot of social anxiety now because people aren't socializing, but now there's anxiety, right, about not socializing. So there's that, and that is a big reason. And I would venture to say, without even knowing what the stats are, that's the primary reason why people are using hemp-derived CBD right now is because of anxiety. The other reason is insomnia, and insomnia is sort of related to anxiety. And then the third reason is pain. Well, why it has to be psychoactive. CBD has to be psychoactive if it's helping to relieve your anxiety. It's working on those systems in your body. So the endocannabinoid system now is working with your neurological system, it's working with your gastrointestinal system, etc., to relieve that anxiety. And it's really amazing how it works. And it does, but that is because it is psychoactive. So, you know, for me as a writer, words are very important to me. And I think, we know that words can, you know, be hurtful to people. Think about all the ways that we use words and how words can be so powerful. Well, in this case, we're taking away that power from CBD and cannabis and hemp by saying that it's not psychoactive and trying to make it look bad. And I think the big reason why a lot of, because really this started sadly with many of the CBD, hemp-derived CBD manufacturers. And I think that they were trying, well, I know they were trying to separate themselves from marijuana, from THC, and trying to make THC look bad. Well, I got news for you. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are many reasons why people, for health and wellness reasons and for mitigating symptoms of disease, should be using cannabis with THC in it. And of course, that's going to have a greater psychoactivity. But you know, there's what's the number now, Christy? I think it's 140 cannabinoids is what the number that I hear. There's about 140 cannabinoids in the plant, right? Of which CBD and THC are only 2. And so we don't, those other cannabinoids probably, some of them probably have minor psychoactivity. So let's not, we don't need to denigrate one cannabinoid to lift up another, right? Your mother always told you that.
I love this. Yes. And I want to explain too, like, definition of psychoactive is a chemical substance that primarily on the central nervous system, where it alters brain function. If you're anxious, depressed, addicted, unmotivated, you want your brain function to change, and it results in temporary changes in perception. Perception is everything. If you perceive yourself as anxious and you can shift that, that is the definition of psychoactive. It improves mood, consciousness, and behavior. Now, there are so many foods that people are doing daily that are psychoactive. You mentioned coffee. Exercise is psychoactive. Chocolate is psychoactive. Chocolate hits almost all the same receptors as CBDs and a lot of other cannabis molecules. CB1 receptor, CB2 receptor, and a lot of the G protein coupling receptors. Cayenne is psychoactive. Sugar is psychoactive. And when herbs like nutmeg, vanilla, black pepper, clove, cinnamon, ginger, etc., are psychoactive, they're working on the central nervous system. So this conversation is so profound because I do want to get away from this conversation that psychoactive is bad, and if something is psychoactive, it's a drug, and it's actually detrimental has detrimental effects versus beneficial effects.
Absolutely. And you pointed out, I want to, talking about exercise. So remember we always talk about endorphins in exercise. That's actually not accurate. It's actually your endocannabinoids. So you know that high that you feel after you run or you bike, or you swim, though that is your endocannabinoid system at work. And here's the funny thing. So all the years that I have been guiding people on what to eat, that let's say if we just take something like the an anti-inflammatory food plan, which is very important right now during the pandemic. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people are not consuming an anti-inflammatory food plan. It's more like a cookies, chips, and cola, food plan, which would be an inflammatory food plan. But when you eat, an anti-inflammatory foods, you are actually now regulating your endocannabinoid system. So I realize now, and massage impacts your endocannabinoid system and is psychoactive. Think about a hug. This is another thing that people are missing. And there was a great interview that I listened to about this, just the action, this type of thing, giving somebody a back rub, just giving somebody a big hug, that's psychoactive. So now we're missing all that. We're missing all that during the pandemic. Even, and that's why we had that, that level of anxiety. If we think about the micro interactions that we used to have every day, talking to strangers, or, let's say you went out every day to get a cup of coffee. And so you'd have this 5-minute dialogue or even less with your barista. Those things are important. So now you don't have that. You don't have that interaction. You don't have the little hugs or the handshakes or whatever. So now what's happened? We have more anxiety. So we're missing these little pieces, and this is where I have seen CBD be very, very successful for all in all age groups.
Yeah, so because the children right now are really capture my heart, because they're getting even more traumatized by masking and all these plastic things are going all over the place. Literally, their world to them is probably perceived as unsafe and as a threat, and the long-term consequences of this are looking like PTSD. In the long term, this is a short-term and long-term problem that we're going to have more PTSD, anxiety, like you said, anxiety-induced insomnia. All that, even just stress is inflammatory. So I have more pain and fibromyalgia and migraines and IBS because the gut is sensing an unsafe environment, which leads us to a fight and flight response.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as CBD in these conditions, I think we could all be embracing the fact that this is psychoactive, because if it wasn't, it wouldn't be working to help with these conditions that are
correct. Yes. What would be the point? Right.
What would be the point of drinking coffee if it wasn't psychoactive?
Well, there are people who drink decaf. They like the taste of coffee. So, right. But I don't think you're going to buy CBD if it's not working. If it's not working for you and not helping to relieve your anxiety or your insomnia or your pain.
No, of course you're not. In fact, the people that do buy that and don't have results for whatever reasons, maybe slow quality, maybe the label is misleading, usually don't keep purchases of something that doesn't work. So this is something that we really need to shift our consciousness around and start embracing and educating people, which you do so well, that this works because it is food for the central nervous system, which is nudged in the right way, in the beneficial ways, changes perception and behavior and mood. And we need a lot of that now, because the world can be really, the big unknown can be either frightening or exciting, or if you don't feel like you have control and there's, you can't see your family members and get the oxytocin from your hugs and the communication from your communities, it's looking pretty bleak right now,
Mm-hmm.
which is not healthy. Excuse me, my nose is running. um, I, I want to switch gears real quick because you wrote this incredible book called CBD Oil Miracle. And this book, why I love this book so much, and I reference it all the time. I don't know if you can see it in the light, because it's broken down into symptoms or conditions and how CBD works. Will you explain a little bit about what inspired this beautiful book and what inspired
Well,
it and
sure.
how you came up with
The first part of the book is really about the endocannabinoid system. It's about the plant. I do talk about not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. So it's sort of like laying the foundation for how we need to bring this plant back as, in the toolbox of practitioners and also for people, for consumers to have at home. The same way everybody, has a medicine cabinet that that has certain, OTC medications in it, right? Well, it would be helpful if it also had, a hemp-derived CBD in that it's part of the toolbox. And
yeah.
and of course, people only use what's in the toolbox, right? There's some sort of expression: if all you have is a hammer, then everything is a nail, right? So
Yes.
having this in the toolbox is very important. And then in the book, there's a number of different conditions, and I indicate whether or not, and it doesn't mean that the CBD is going to work for those conditions. So I chose to leave in conditions where CBD is not always the best choice, where the medication is the best choice, and sometimes where THC, cannabis with THC, is a better choice. So let's say if we take pain, for instance, I mean, if people have very, very severe pain, CBD may not do the trick. They may have to really be going for, a medical marijuana cultivar or strain that has THC in it. And I also want to point out something else, Christy, that, in our culture here in the US, more is better, bigger is better. And that's just not true. And I have to say that, my mother always taught me that good things come in small packages because we're very small in our family. Also, you can get very nice jewelry in small packages. But but what I'm really hinting at is microdosing. So the idea of having big doses of cannabis, and of course this is, I think, we had to talk about a little bit about the elephant in the room. I think a lot of the canophobia comes from people who maybe have never used cannabis, and I'm talking about marijuana, or they know somebody who never got liftoff. So they know someone who is, and I'm sorry, it's usually a guy, is in his mother's basement with a bong and playing video games, and he's never lifted off. There's never been any takeoff. That's one category, which is actually quite small. When
Yeah.
I entered into the cannabis business, I was really amazed. There are so many people, and I'm talking about marijuana, who use marijuana every single day, and of all different ilks. So teachers, lawyers, doctors, but they're microdosing. And that's something you can also do with CBD. A lot of people might only take it in the morning, but for it to really work properly, you really do need to be taking it all day, a few times all day long. And we've heard about microdosing a lot from mushrooms. So it's funny that people are talking about psilocybin and other mushrooms, but they're not really talking about cannabis. But we know that for anything, I like to liken this to makeup. Less is more. So, that, I don't remember when that came out, but, at one time, I guess that was in the 80s, when there was a lot of it was over the top. And then people thought, okay, this is ridiculous. So just use a little bit and you can get a good effect. And really that is what your endocannabinoid system is looking for. And even if you look at people who drink coffee, what happens if they're drinking 6 cups of coffee? Things generally don't go well. So, you know, you want to do more microdosing. So maybe an espresso a few times a day instead.
Oh, I love this. And it's it's almost like this endocannabinoid system has a pulse. And you don't just tap into it once, you tap into it consistently. And so it's consistently pulsing this information that we can from this plant. And, you know, this is the one problem I have with the marijuana industry is that, you know, to me, they've hybridized the marijuana to be extremely high in THC, which can, you know, have detrimental effects. But if someone actually does the microdosing, let's say 2.5 or less with a full spectrum hemp or something, they have less of the high too. And there's other ways to take it so you don't actually get that high, like a suppository or something. But I think we really need, and you're so good at this, at encouraging people to think and change their perception about what we think medicine is, what, you know, this box that it comes in, and that maybe, you know, a little bit more or less plant is going to do the toning, that pulsing, that feeding, this vast system that's literally everywhere. Like back to original station, it's modulating, which means supporting, balancing. If something's too high, it brings it down to balance. If it's too low, it brings it up to balance. Every single system and tissue and gland and organ in the body. Like how, to me, when the endocannabinoid system isn't pulsing, healthy, signaling, it's like being very dehydrated. And we know we can't just like sip of water and say, hey, I should be hydrated. It can take consistent drinking of the water to stay regulated and hydrated. And hemp and cannabis can be much the same, especially for people who are endocannabinoid system dehydrated. They need a strong pulse on the system.
And I think what helps that is the integration with these other modalities that then impact the endocannabinoid system. So nutrition, as I said, talking about an anti-inflammatory food plan, massage, you know, chiropractic. I like to refer to exercise as movement, because for a lot of people, the term exercise can be off-putting because they don't want to go to a gym, or they don't want, they're not going to be on a team. But so, you know, yoga, stretching, bike riding, walking, all of these things, sex with orgasm. So all of these things, you know, meditation, all of these things impact the endocannabinoid system. So that, and that was the whole idea behind the Holistic Cannabis Academy, which is at holisticcanna.com, was actually teaching people how to integrate cannabis with other modalities to impact the endocannabinoid system. Because of course we have a tendency, what most people, when they go to see a doctor, what do they want? They want the prescription, right? They want the piece of paper.
Yep.
And that's what they get. That's what they've been accustomed to. But what they really need to be getting a full-on lifestyle plan and wellness coaching, because then you got to change a lot of things, you know, even with CBD, yes, there are people who just want to do the CBD and they don't want to make the other changes. And they have success, but I don't know if it's going to be long-lasting success. You know, you have to be changing everything. It's like people who have diabetes who want to eat whatever and then use the insulin to regulate their blood glucose. Well, they're going to have other bad sequelae from that, and they're not going to have a long life. So, you know, you really have, the integration is so important. And you know, you don't have to do everything at once. So, you know, pick something that you enjoy. you gotta pick something that you like to do and start out with that. Like, I don't know how many people know about tapping. Tapping is a super easy thing that you can do, and it really helps to regulate breathing, which is of course what meditation does. So there's tapping apps out there. The one that I use is called the Tapping Solution, and it can really help. You know, so you can combine tapping with CBD. Super easy.
Wow. I love this. Tapping is one of the tools that I use. And it really, I mean, that's a psychoactive activity because it's really
Absolutely.
changing your thoughts, your perception, your mood. You can't stay stuck in a negative feedback loop and be tapping, because the whole purpose is to shift gears and get out of that lane that's going nowhere fast. This is so cool. I love this conversation. I just thought of like 5 things to ask you at once, and now none of them are on my brain because I never thought of tapping as something that actually could even be modulating the endocannabinoid system too. But it works so profoundly because you're making contact and there's receptors all over the skin that are signaling to the brain and the body and the organs.
Yeah, it
And changing.
basically changes the breathing. So once you change your breathing, that is, which is what meditation does, right? That you are impacting the
Yes.
endocannabinoid system.
Oh my gosh, breath is so important. I don't think we talk about that enough. How that can even be, for the purpose of this conversation, psychoactive and nourishing to the endocannabinoid system.
Mhm.
The bottom line here, folks, is that your endocannabinoid system is it's fundamentally important for your health. And Laura, I assuming you feel the same way, but let's focus on prevention too. If you're not taking CBD or hemp or a full spectrum because you don't think there's anything wrong with you, it's better to keep it that way and to get that toolbox and fill it up with your hemp products, because prevention truly is the best medicine. And it's a lot less to prevent something than it is to try to get your health back, which I think we're going to see a lot of people getting their health back, because as we see supplements rising, we also see junk food rising. And it is a detrimental psychoactive. Sugar is a psychoactive substance that is detrimental because it hits opioid receptors, is highly addictive, and it can change behaviors in not so positive ways.
And it's inflammatory. It's super
Oh,
inflammatory.
And it crashes the immune system, which most people are trying to build and bring resilience to at the moment. You have, you're co-founder and education director of the Holistic Cannabis Academy. You have helped so many practitioners and providers bring cannabis into their careers, their practice, their clinics. They've influenced many, many people. So many people think of you as a thought leader, an educator, an influencer. You certainly are in my book. For our listeners, if you have questions at your school, your practice, want to see you as a practitioner, etc., what are the ways to get a hold of you?
Sure. Well, I had mentioned that the website for the Holistic Cannabis Academy is holisticcanna.com. And you can also find it on my website, which is lauralagano.com. And my email is pretty easy. It's laura@lauralagano.com. So that's the way that's how you can find me.
Do you see people remotely in these lovely times?
I can, yes, absolutely.
Oh, that's perfect. So listen, everyone, thank you for being with us today. Remember to hemp your health. We have this amazing expert today. So if you're feeling like you need a little bit more guidance, education, having your hand held through these stressful times, please contact Laura. She is a wealth of information, and and all be healthy. Health is always with us. It's only when disease and these symptoms come in that we fall away from health. So let's lean into health. Let's improve our health. Let's become resilient and regenerate, starting with the endocannabinoid system because it's huge and it touches every single system in your body. Laura, this has been wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you for bringing your wisdom and expertise to hemp health.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me, Christy.
You are welcome. Hopefully you will be back with us soon. And till then, take care. Happy December. This is the wrap for 2020. We got a few more shows, and we're gonna kick off 2020, and we're gonna bring in the new year, and we're gonna do it all through health and positive vibes. So thank you all.
Great.
Thank you, Laura. See you
Ciao.
next week. Yeah.